Hello, Hidden Gems. It is Lauren and Dr. John going live as, can you believe it, as the jury deliberates. Well, they actually went back to their hotel. They're sequestered. And so they're back at their hotel. But closing arguments in Chad Daybell's trial happened today, both the prosecution and the defense. And then, or the prosecution followed by the defense, and then a rebuttal by the prosecution. Lindsay Blake delivered the state's closing arguments. John Pryor, of course, Chad Daybell's attorney, delivered the defense's closing arguments. What a day. And then after, we all hung out until almost 6 p.m. at the courthouse because the jury was in there. We didn't know if they were going to decide to pull an all-nighter or if they were going to go back to their hotel again, where they cannot go home until this jury or until this verdict is out. But they chose to go home. So we or not home, to their hotel. They're home for the night. And so I left, and now and John was watching on the sofa. We were texting. I was in the courtroom. Before we begin, I have to show you, I met two wonderful hidden gems tonight, and they made me a gift. And I'm not sure if I can show you. It's Chris's birthday today, but she gifted me something. And I'll have to unblur this. You guys are gonna see where I am. So I've got to show you this, John. John has not seen this. I'm gonna put my mic down while I show you this. A T-shirt was made for me.
Okay.
So can you guys see that? So it's Slug Hut Sweet. Okay, hold on. I know I dropped. Can you guys hear me on my mic? I have to have my mic down here. And there's the cozy cone with a window. There's a slug, as you can see, in the top of the cozy cone. Upstairs. This part might be my favorite. Bring your own electricity. Because there's just a little bit in the cozy cone. There isn't any, or there's a little bit. You've got East Idaho News's copter up there. And that says Raccoon Realty selling it. Just keeps getting better. And then on the back, you have the classic line from our hostile realtor: "You own it. How many acres is it? You own it. You tell me." It was such a treat. Thank you to Krista and Kelly. They came and I appreciate it. They also gifted me, I'll show you really quickly, a Hidden Gems t-shirt, one of my favorite colors.
Nice.
I just want to say thank you. I've met so many wonderful hidden gems at court, and I know that oftentimes I'm so busy or I've got something going on, or today I was sick. I kept like leaving people because I was like, if I'm sick, I'm gonna stay away from everyone there. But everybody is so kind, and I just want to say thank you. And what a great shirt! What a great shirt!
Yeah, we've had a lot of great, funny memes over the course of the trial. So our gems are so clever and funny and smart. We're really blessed. We have such a brilliant and wonderful and supportive community. So thank you.
Yes, and yes, we at age 77, Vicky is hoping that she can come to Vegas to our pool party. So once I'm home, we'll start planning that because we have surpassed 144,000. So thank you, everyone.
Tell her to bring her Fitbit though. We're all gonna have to get Fitbits. I think Pryor missed his. I'll get to it later, but I think Pryor missed in his closing arguments. Pryor missed his Fitbit moment, but it could have been like, for me, it could have been like an OJ moment, but he missed it.
He missed it. Well, what did you think, babe? I just want to ask you your thoughts.
Yeah, so I think Lindsay Blake, who you have an emoji in chat for Super Blake. I think Super Blake delivered. I think she did a great job. I think I would call it, looking back, I would call it kind of a Daybell greatest hits day, in the sense that a lot of the stuff you and I have talked about since this trial started, she covered. A lot of the analyses you and I have done, she covered so much of that. I mean, and more. And there were actually a few things I didn't know that she covered. And so I think I always talk about that juries are often swayed by the best story that fits the evidence. And she told a great story. This, by the way, is a very difficult story to summarize. So, it's hard to tell this story in a succinct way. But she did that. She presented a really compelling narrative, and she backed it up with evidence. And honestly, after she finished, I thought, since we live in Vegas, I thought that if the sports books were gonna like put some odds on this, the odds of acquittal would be astronomically low. So I think at the end of the closing arguments, I felt like there's just no way. There's no way this jury's gonna quit Chad Daybell. So I think the chances
Okay.
of conviction are extremely high.
Okay. Okay. Well, I'm like just so curious sitting in there, watching so many things. Even and Chad Daybell, I want to say, lost his poker face today. That
Oh
was
yeah.
interesting.
This was let's talk about that. This was a different
Right.
Chad Daybell.
It was.
This was a Chad Daybell that I wouldn't say he was emotional. That would be an overstatement. But this was a Chad Daybell who was making right. He was responding to a lot of things that were being said. He did, to use your term, he did the eyebrow lift Joker face many times today.
So many times.
He did the pursed lips. Right. He shook his head a number of times. So that you were there. It's not ideal for those of us watching the Zoom feed because it's not the clearest feed for
Sure.
assessing nonverbals, but you were in there, so you were able to see it up close. I mean, it looked to me like I think the anger that we've talked about, that was clearly there. The shaking his head was kind of disbelief, or it was at the very least, it was a negation of some of the things Lindsay was saying. I mean, and not just, it was a clear negation with almost what I would call a little bit of hostility.
Yeah, he would shake his head or nod, and at one time, and the only time in the entire trial I saw, he rolled his eyes today. He rolled his eyes when Lindsay Blake was on rebuttal, sharing that they do not know the manner of death for Tylee, that they couldn't know because she was burned. He rolled his eyes. I remember I texted my mod right when I saw it so that I would know the time code, and I still need to go back and get it. But and I don't know if you'll be able to see it on the video, but he rolled his eyes. I was like, I could not believe it. And at one moment, he mouthed something. Um, I do have that. Can we watch him mouthing something really quickly?
I missed that. You have that? Okay. Yeah,
Yep,
let's
right
watch.
here.
Chad labels someone dark. Chad says if someone's so dark or a zombie, the body has to die. Alex believes Chad 100%.
Watch it one more time.
Chad labels someone dark. Chad says if someone's so dark or a zombie, the body has to die. Alex believes Chad 100%.
There you go.
That, so, and it wasn't just that, the head shaking was quite frequent. There's, I think I'm getting what you have, by the way. I hope it's
I'm
not.
worried. I'm worried because I was just with you over the weekend. I'm worried.
So that when, there's a real problem with those types of behaviors, by the way. I mean, understandably, I'm sure Pryor told him to be as still and stoic as possible, and he's done a pretty good job of that for the most part. But when you shake your head and roll your eyes and mouth off, it not only does it show the level of arrogance, there's a certain level of arrogance going on there, and there's a certain level of smugness, but also it's kind of a sign of hostility. Like, he's not respecting the prosecution. He's not respecting what they're saying. He's opposing it openly on right. And I mean, juries, for the most part, juries aren't going to like that. In fact, I would argue that it's some of those very qualities that got him in trouble in the first place. He's showing us in real time who he is.
Right. I completely agree. There were many people that noticed it, and there was one juror that was actually looking right at him the whole time. So I'm speculating because I can't make eye contact and I can't decide who Chad was looking at. But there was one juror in particular who was
Okay.
looking at Chad the whole time,
Okay.
eye contact. And at
Yeah.
one point, Chad Daybell was looking across the room, looking as if he was looking at someone. So I'm gonna assume that juror, but I don't know. Could have been a different juror. And he finally went, like, you know, like stop looking, like, and he raised his eyebrows really high. It was like hostility that I haven't seen before. And unfortunately, that juror drew an alternate
No,
juror.
I was just
Yeah,
about to
we
ask.
had 5. Yeah, we had 5 jurors draw the alternate. I'll be honest, 3 of them I'm pretty disappointed about.
Well,
The guy that was sleeping in front of Pryor today during his closing arguments, he'll be deliberating.
also, how random was the draw? I don't think they even shook
So
up
random.
whatever they drew from. I don't know, a box or a hat or whatever. The numbers were like 16, 17, 18. Like, I mean, I don't think they even bothered to shake up the box because the numbers were almost consecutive. But
It's like the most unofficial official thing
yeah,
ever in court. And
yeah,
now we do
it's
our official hat drawing.
yeah, we're gonna do it right. We're gonna do our random drawings: 15, 16, 17, 18.
18.
So I think that the Chad's nonverbals were not good for him. They were not good for the defense. I think that it could come back. Not that he wasn't in trouble anyway, but it could really backfire on him. And it's so arrogant. He just doesn't, he doesn't have a shred of humility.
John does not think Chad. Oh, does Dr. John really think that Chad thinks he
Yes,
will get off? Really?
I think that the all the nonverbals, the head shaking, the mouthing off, I think that's indicative of someone who thinks they're right. Here I will say this. So, and again, I wasn't entirely focused on Chad. I missed some of those nonverbals, but there was a moment when Lindsay Blake was finishing up and she put up a picture of the 3 victims. And so it was right before break, right before she finished. And I think there was maybe just a brief moment, I think, when Chad might have realized that maybe he should have taken a deal.
Mm. That's what Andrea's saying here. Maybe Chad finally got it.
I think that Lindsay Blake's closing arguments were so compelling and she told the story so well and backed it up with excellent evidence. In fact, like, I would call it kind of a greatest hits of the Daybell trial. And many of the greatest hits that you and I have talked about too. So that you and I felt were kind of the most compelling moments. And so I felt like at the very end of that, it looked like Chad might have showed a little bit of fear. I think there was maybe a slight amount of fear and maybe a slight amount of humility. And I almost felt like there was sort of this moment of, oh no, maybe the death penalty is real.
Mm. Right. Right. So he had this moment.
But that all disappeared during Pryor's closing arguments, by the way.
It did. He felt quite confident after that, didn't he?
Oh, he
Disappeared.
was really empowered, I think, by Pryor's closing arguments. Which it speak and so let's talk about
And I want to, yeah, I want to hear what you think of him. So this is what I've heard. I haven't talked to many people. I noticed he just repeats stuff a lot. I was like, this could have been half the time if he just wouldn't repeat things over and over again. But I realized he was emphasizing. I talked to one of our moderators after court, and she thought they were quite compelling. Well, let me just ask you.
Wait. Okay, say that again. That she felt that Pryor was compelling.
Yeah, and she told me I haven't been on. Look, guys, I have not been able to see people's opinions online. It's kind of good because it's like super authentic what you're getting from me. But she said that there was talk online in sort of groups or, Reddit. I don't know if it was Reddit, but some place where people were admitting that he did a pretty good job, that it was a good performance. I'll be honest, in court, sitting there, what I was feeling was that the jurors were probably annoyed. Again, one of them was sleeping. Yes, he did make it through. He'll be deliberating. That they were done. But I want to know what you think, John, because that was me being in court, and then I'm talking to people out of court. What were your thoughts?
Well, first of all, it started off a little slow. It felt like, to me, it kind of felt like a legal class, like he was teaching law school, and it was like law school 101, and it was kind of theoretical, and he wanted to talk a lot about agreement and what that means. But as we talked about, his job is to sway one or two jurors. And so he's trying to create a little bit of confusion in terms of what terms mean and what reasonable doubt is. And I mean, I get it, but it's, but he wasn't really dealing with any of the evidence at that point. It was purely
Right.
theoretical. I mean, he actually said, I don't have to present any evidence. The burden of proof isn't on me. But there has to be an agreement. That for conspiracy to commit murder, you need an agreement, which is something you and I talked about on our last show on Saturday. And what he essentially said was that you need a written agreement. You need proof of an agreement. That nowhere in any text or anywhere was there any agreement to engage in these murders. But as we talked about with Charles Manson, and I could go on, by the way, there's a lot of crimes where as we talked about with Manson, it's implied. The agreement can be implied through one's actions.
Yeah.
And even more so with like Manson, it was Manson's beliefs. It was kind of Manson's ideology that in the end that led to a conviction. And so I think he's trying to sow some confusion. He's trying to create some confusion about what an agreement means. I mean, you don't need a text. And Lindsay Blake came back to this. You don't need a text showing that Chad's saying, oh, let's go kill all these people, right? Like, you don't need that. That's not, it can be implicit. It can be inferred from behavior.
Yeah.
The legal term is implied. But he's trying to, he's trying to create doubt. The problem with it is it's I felt like I was in a law school 101 class. Like it was theoretical. It wasn't, at that point, he wasn't really bringing any evidence, right? I thought, oh man, this is like Pryor has nothing to say and he's filling time.
Yeah.
He's trying to sound important, and he's trying to take up some time so that people think, oh, he didn't just get up here and rest his case after 5 minutes and look like he doesn't know what he's doing. So I think some of it was filler. Some of it was just trying to create this illusion that, he knew what he was doing. But it was, I don't think those moments will connect to the jury at all. He also, this is kind of an interesting thing is, he was sending the message. You know, he kind of said, remember, he said he had to look up the word acquiescence.
Yeah.
So there's these moments where Pryor is, you know, he's presenting himself as kind of this simple, he's, you know, he's trying to present himself as this simple, humble guy from, I don't know where he's from Idaho, that had these dreams. Remember this moment? He had these dreams of becoming a professional fisherman with a 30-inch waist who has to look up the word acquiescence. But in spite of all that, like, you know, because everyone who their lifelong dream is to become a fisherman, of course, they all go to law school when they give up on that dream, right? Like it was kind of preposterous in the sense that there's a disconnect between dreaming about being a fisherman and then becoming a defense attorney. Yeah. Right. But I mean, he's clearly doing that for the jury in this sense. He's trying to connect with them. He's trying to present himself as kind of this simple, you know, down to earth, plain guy that, you know, he's a kind of an everyman that the jury can relate to, you know, but hey, I'm going to talk about all these legal terms. We're going to talk in legalese so you don't, you know, so you don't think I'm not a fisherman.
Right. Right.
Right. So I, you know, I wasn't connecting to any of that. It was actually kind of rubbing me in the wrong way. But again, you know, I'm not on the jury, so it doesn't really matter what I think.
Some people are saying they want to know what you thought about what he said about Heather Daybell and Kay Woodcock, John Pryor. I thought the Heather Daybell thing was fascinating. He just continued to call her a pot stirrer. That pot stirrer, Heather Daybell. That pot stirrer. I'm like, man, everyone buy their pot stirring T-shirt now. We got to make this club bigger. Thank you, Heather, for being our club president. And then Kay, he kind of put down Kay, implying that Lori truly did have to hide from her and that she got this life insurance that, you know, Lori couldn't get. It was kind of a hard moment to hear in court.
Yeah, I mean, you know, throwing Kay under the bus and Heather and, you know, people that we befriended. I mean, I think it was intentional. I think he was, you know, trying to make a point that that they've created problems on this case and you know, they're a little oppositional, which of course is far from the truth. But I have a little person out at my door right now, so
Okay, do you need to go? I can answer some questions while you attend to him. Do you want to just put your mic on mute, or I will, or if you can.
Yeah,
you can go. You can
hold on.
Sorry about the cough, guys. I thought I was on mute for a second. I apologize. Let me answer some questions. People are asking about the jurors. Did any good jurors? I pinned a lot of comments here. So there were a few jurors. So I mentioned that there was one juror that was crying today. She is now an alternate. So one of the there have been several jurors that have cried throughout this case. One of them that was crying today, the one that was certainly crying today, became an alternate. Another juror I really like, and Vicky had mentioned him as sort of looking at the ceiling when they read about Tylee's remains and what was done to her, and he seemed so angry that day and really upset. And he's a younger gentleman. He became an alternate today. And then a gentleman that seemed to be staring at Chad Daybell today, or just making contact with him. He became an alternate today. Those were the three I was most disappointed about losing today. The other two were also wonderful. The gentleman that was sleeping in front of John Pryor today, I like him. I mean, bless his soul. Like he's an elderly man, and it's hard to sit in there, especially with all those closing arguments and jury instructions. But he was sleeping right in front of, sort of dozing off, right in front of John Pryor today in the front middle row. He is still a juror, and so Sleepy is still a juror, and he will be deliberating. So there you go. I was just answering their questions about jurors and who was dismissed. We lost a few good ones. John, you are muted.
Okay, I'm back. So hopefully for a few uninterrupted moments here, but we'll see. It's really hard to find people to assist with childcare these days. I think the thing that Pryor was trying to make overall, he was trying to make the point repeatedly that just because you have religious beliefs doesn't mean that you're involved in committing these murders. And so he kept coming back to this idea that anyone can express their beliefs. There's nothing illegal about that. And of course, I mean, so he's arguing essentially for like First Amendment stuff, freedom of speech. But what he's obviously not saying is that when beliefs become extreme and they impact behaviors, and especially the behaviors of groups of people that create harm or cause harm, then it's a problem. Then it becomes illegal. And so, he's trying to kind of confuse the issue and move away. He's trying to normalize Chad's beliefs essentially. And I just don't think that worked. I think that was, I can name so many criminals that I would call ideological criminals. The Unabomber would be one. He was probably the first major kind of ideological criminal in the United States that wrote a manifesto and had very clear beliefs about what should happen in the country. And so Tim McVeigh, Charles Manson, right? There's all kinds of criminals that have extreme beliefs that have murdered people. And so I'm glad Lindsay Blake came back to that later. She said, yeah, beliefs are fine, but just not beliefs that lead to people dying and being murdered.
Right.
And so, but Pryor spent a lot of time trying to normalize that idea. And I don't think that was very effective.
What did you think? And I don't know if you could notice this, but before that, I'm going to say this. I agree. If there are any jurors that are LDS, and we don't know, last year I learned that there were 2 LDS jurors on Lori Vallow Daybell's jury pool, but only 2. Someone said, I think that if more than a few jurors are going to be turned off, that he portrayed Chad as a traditional Mormon. I do agree with that. If there are any LDS jurors, they are going to be turned off by that. I agree, because he was pretty much saying that dark and light scale is normal and commonly taught in church. I agree with this person, and there are a few people asking about it. John Pryor used probably the worst graphics in his PowerPoint. Padlocks and chains. Did you notice it, John?
Yeah,
I noticed it. Yes, and I said Law 101, the cookie cutter closing in the beginning, and then he was all over the place. I agree. Thank you, JPC. It was really bizarre, and somebody else asked that down below here as well. The chains in Pryor's exhibit, deeper meaning?
Yeah, it's first of all, I was shocked that he was using chains, because I've evaluated a lot of inmates that walk in with shackles, which are chains on their, they walk in with chains and they hook them into the table so they can't move, right? Their legs and their feet. And so to start with chains and links and chains is like a prison metaphor.
Yes.
Who would do that? I mean, again, is this like we talked about the idea of Freudian slips?
I know.
Is this like there is something here that could be unconscious about? Maybe he does have some disdain for Chad, because he's certainly, you can look at that, and if you see that as kind of, it's not even subliminal because it's so obvious, but you can look at
They
that
were
and
huge.
say, is he saying Chad should be in chains? Because that's not the message I'd want to send. And the fact that he doesn't see that, the fact that he can't catch that is a problem, right? I mean, he clearly is he's lacking a certain amount of awareness of the situation here and what he's trying to argue. I mean, and not only that, the chains were up the whole presentation.
Yes, they were. It was really weird.
You know, maybe he ran out of PowerPoint money to hire a graphic designer.
I don't know. He could have hired someone off of Fiverr or something, or maybe that's what he did.
Yeah, yeah, right. Yeah, I think he may have turned to Fiverr, but yeah, that was when he came out of the blocks with that. I was just like, well, this isn't real, right? Like links in a chain. I mean, or is he thinking ahead? Maybe he's thinking ahead about ways to break Chad out of prison. I don't know, but it was bizarre.
Very bizarre. Oh my goodness, KH, thank you. You too deserve a fun date night when this trial wraps. Thanks for all you've done to bring us thoughtful Daybell Vallow insights over the years. We do deserve a good date night. That's not a split
Yeah,
screen. We go
if
on a date night, we go into our separate rooms and do a split screen. We're like,
if
so how are you
if
doing?
if one or the other of us could ever get healthy at the same time. You come home sick and then you get me sick and then I stay sick and then you get better and then Banks gets sick. Man, but it's summer, so we'll figure that out. But
Yeah, but thank you, KH. We'll do that on you. Thank you for your kindness. We will. Thank you.
so let me talk about the most important part of the prior arguments, and that had to be when he got into motive. I mean,
Yeah.
I sat there in disbelief. I don't know about you, but to talk about the things first of all, he tells the jury, you guys can't speculate. You guys can't draw inferences. Never mind that like every jury that's ever existed has to draw an inference from data. They have to, you have to look at facts and draw conclusions. That's just what they do, right? So he's telling them, but you can't do that unless you have an agreement that's written down. It doesn't count. Don't speculate. But then he launches into like this insane speculation, right? So it's perfectly fine and I mean, he's right. It's true. The defense doesn't have to really provide evidence to support their case. They don't. The burden's on the state, but it's still not a good look.
Right.
When you say don't speculate and then you resort to like the most far-fetched, rampant speculation imaginable. So let's talk about that. So the Alex Cox, the two witnesses that he killed, that Alex Cox murdered Tylee and JJ because he didn't want witnesses. I mean, first of all, as Lindsay Blake pointed out, it's not clear whether Tylee witnessed the murders.
Right.
Secondly, presumably JJ was outside during a lot of that. He wasn't even in the house. So that's speculation because Tylee seems to have been in her room and JJ wasn't in the house when after the shots were fired, Lori told Tylee, go get your brother and put him in the car.
Right.
So to suggest that Alex Cox murdered the two kids to eliminate witnesses is beyond speculation. It's not consistent, as Lindsay Blake thankfully said that later, but she said, go look at that. Look at that evidence. You'll see that Tylee was not a witness. And JJ was almost certainly not a witness. So
yeah.
So to lead with that, I was shocked. I mean, the problem with I've been waiting for a theory of the case from prior for this whole trial, and now we finally got it, and it was insane.
You know what? I agree, and you know what? I was actually really grateful he put all the puzzle pieces together. You know what I was thinking the whole time? I was like, "Okay, so this is what the Daybell kids think." I mean, there's a part of me that's really always wanted to know, how is this whole thing put together? How how is this word salad or this, this, mental gymnastics done? And he laid it out, and I was like, "Okay." I
Well, not
mean, it
only
it wasn't believable, but I was like, "Okay, so that's what the kids think." I'm like, "Thanks for, like, at least laying it out," but it was
well, not
wild.
not only did he lay it out, what he was showing us was Chad's psyche. This is Chad. Chad is I believe that Chad is the one directing Pryor towards this theory of the case. Because you could see Chad's nonverbals when he when he talked about that Chad was the, did you see this? When he talked about Chad being the target of the so-called paintball shooting, Chad
Right.
was like, yes.
No, I missed
I
that,
mean,
really?
I
Chad
mean,
was like,
he wasn't that demonstrative, but I mean, he was like, you could see he was like,
"Oh, I do think I saw that." He nodded. Didn't he nod? Like, "Yep."
yeah, he nodded, right. And so
Right. His
I
wife
think,
is being attacked, and he's like, "That was me. Yep, that was me."
right, exactly. I mean, he knows it wasn't him. In the police report, he comes out the side of the house after the fact, right? Like he knows what's going to happen. He knows exactly what's going to happen. And then so he knows what's going on. He's waiting for her to get shot. I don't know. He's paying attention to the timing. Tammy's shot at, or the gun, doesn't fire, and then he comes out. So to suggest that Chad was in the car and that Alex Cox wanted to shoot him, that was the other thing that was absolutely nonsensical. Like it was when Pryor was trying to make that argument, he kept stumbling over himself. He kept saying, I don't know if you caught this. He kept saying, I was waiting for something coherent. And it was like incoherent because he kept saying, well, Lori, he was making an argument that Lori only cared about money and herself and Alex Cox. So somehow, because she only cared about money and herself and Alex Cox, she wanted Alex to kill Chad. So she was angry because she didn't get the insurance money, Charles' insurance money. So that set her up for her next victim, who was going to be Chad. And so this is what he argued. He kept saying, well, because Lori had been married 5 times, and because Lori had been married 5 times, and because that he clearly had to kill she had to kill Chad, because that's what you do when you're married 5 times. You go, and you don't get insurance money, you go kill the person that you want to marry, that you marry 2 months later or a month later.
Yeah, it's not a great thing too since, 3 of her husbands are still alive too.
And notice what he didn't
Ex-husbands.
say, by the way. What he didn't say, he starts off by saying Lori only cared about the money, and he was trying to go to the fact that he was going to kill Chad for the money, the insurance money, but he couldn't say it because Chad and Tammy were the only ones on the policies. So Lori couldn't have killed Chad. If Chad was the target, she wasn't killing him for the money because Lori wouldn't have gotten the money. Lori wouldn't have been the beneficiary of the money. So his whole argument was convoluted, but basically came down to the fact that he was, I guess he was divorce shaming Lori. And maybe
Yes.
even like,
Yes, he was. Divorce shaming was
it was divorce
definitely
shaming
happening.
Lori, and maybe even I could go further and probably using another term. He was shaming her for being promiscuous. I guess like,
Yes.
I don't know if I can use this term on YouTube, so I won't. But clearly, like
Promiscuous shaming. Yes.
promiscuous shaming. Clearly, like his disdain for women keeps coming out repeatedly during this trial. Because his argument was, well, you know, she's been married 5 times, so of course she had to go after Chad, because that's just what, I guess that's what Black Widows do. Even though she's obsessed with money and she wasn't going to get money for killing Chad, she had to kill him. And I mean, I was just scratching my head at the end of that. Like, this was his big aha moment, that Chad was really the victim and Chad was the target, right? But since he was talking about motive and he couldn't identify motive, the whole thing fell apart.
Right.
So what if Chad was the target? What was the motive? It wasn't money.
What was the motive?
He didn't identify. That's where he kept stumbling all over himself. He couldn't form a cogent argument for his biggest aha moment of the entire trial, aside from the fact that JJ and Tyler were witnesses to the murder of Charles and had to be eliminated. His biggest aha moment was that Chad was really the target, not Tammy. But he couldn't figure out why.
So
Nor could Chad, by the way.
Alex was targeting Chad for his not money.
Or targeting Chad because he was trying, right, it was implied because Alex was trying to protect Lori. But if she was trying to protect Lori, then why did Lori marry Chad like a month and a half later? And why did Chad give Alex a blessing 2 months later? Right? Like, none of that made any sense.
No.
For anyone who's followed this trial with, you know, to any degree, like, none of that added up. And I actually kind of thought, you know, if you're going to throw, I've said this before, if you're going to throw out a theory of the case as the defense, you need to, it has to be tied to some reality. And
yes.
if it's not, it will backfire spectacularly. And I think, unless the jury's just been sleeping the whole trial, this is going to backfire. And but this is what Chad wants the world to know. Chad wants the world to know that Alex Cox was coming for him, that he's the victim. He had nothing to do with JJ and Tylee because Alex wanted to kill them because they were witnesses. And that Chad, the true victim in all this, is Chad Daybell. And presumably, and maybe the raccoon, and maybe Melanie Gibb.
Right. And the quarter pounder. No, right. Chad Daybell was the victim in everything. He was next on Lori's list. I have slowed the chat as much as I possibly can. It doesn't go any slower than what I've put it on. Yes, he does. That always brings women.
That was a remarkable moment that Chad was the target. Because I mean, I'm still trying to process it. It was so far-fetched and so unbelievable that I can't believe that Pryor went there.
I agree, Kristen. If Pryor really thought that Alex wanted to kill Chad, then why fight that it was a paintball gun instead of a rifle? Like, pick one. Either it was a paintball gun and, you know, a kid in the neighborhood, or it was a target on Chad and it was a rifle. But, I mean, again, just sort of like, it's like seeing what sticks. You know, throwing spaghetti on the wall and seeing what sticks.
Right, he was. Yeah, right. There was a lot of that, but I mean, when he finally got around to kind of formulating his actual theory of the case, it was disjointed, and there was no basis in reality. It had, and Lindsay Blake came back to that and refuted a lot of it, thankfully, but it was still, for me, it was still a really, I don't know, you know, a really absurd moment.
It was. Also, I want to say the things that he said about Kay Woodcock, you know, and he pointed at Kay. He pointed at Kay. I don't think that's going to go over well with the jury either. You know, they've seen Kay there every day. To, you know, she testified, to kind of gesture towards her isn't going to do well either. Did you notice things like that too?
Well, he pointed it. Didn't he point at Chad too when he said he's the my man is the target.
Yeah.
The other thing
Yeah.
I loved is the reference to Keith Morrison in Dateline. I kept thinking, was that? I hope that was the episode we were on.
Yeah, Keith Morrison, that's a good point. Keith Morrison was trying to protect the LDS Church with Melanie Gibb.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
if that's
I
not a
loved it.
conspiracy theory, I mean, I can even see like Melanie Gibb wanting to protect the LDS Church. When you're throwing in Keith Morrison into your closing argument about wanting to protect the LDS Church, I mean, what? Where are you going with this? I mean,
Well, right. So this is another theory. So again, he's running into problems because he's got multiple theories of the case. He would have kept. I think he would have been a lot better off by keeping things a lot simpler. But so I took his argument to be that Melanie Gibb and David Warwick and apparently Heather Daybell, all of them set up Chad and the church, by the way, so that the entire mainstream LDS church, they were trying to portray Chad as a religious zealot because he was making the church look bad. So once again, Chad was the target. He was the victim because even though his beliefs were completely normal and he was writing these books, which people loved, and he has every right to express himself, that's true. The church couldn't handle it. And the church they could see the zealotry behind the ideas. And as Pryor said, even though there wasn't any zealotry, and they had to target him, they had to take him down because the church was threatened.
right. That one's going to stick to the wall. That's going to be the one. They're going to be like, aha, now you're getting somewhere, Mr. Pryor. I like this Aussie Tad says, squirrel. I mean, raccoons. I mean, Melanie Gibb. Right, exactly. It was everywhere. Chad's the target. No, wait, it was a paintball gun. No, wait, Melanie Gibb was there. I know. So much salad spaghetti. Little green man in the courtroom. Yeah, I brought up a little green man, to use the beliefs. If I said that I loved a little green man, what was it? Yeah, if I believed in a little green man. Me too, Nina. I can't wait to see his face when the jury comes back. I mean, I'll be interested in seeing his face. I want to know what do you suspect? What do you expect? Or is he gonna be an empty vessel and just sit there?
I think right now, he believes that he's going to be acquitted.
Hmm.
So I think he'll be surprised. I have a
What, do you
little
want to
squirrel.
do you want to invite him in? Do you want to invite the little squirrel in to sit and wait with you? Wait, mute maybe, or you didn't mute, guys. You didn't mute. Oh, I was able to mute. I know, guys, I do need hot tea. Thank you. I'm actually starring a lot of your suggestions, and I will do them. Um, I have a lot of starred questions here. I muted you. Are you good? I unmuted you now.
Okay.
So,
yeah. Did you unmute me? Yeah, I'm back.
okay, you're back. So, do you think that Chad has convinced Lori that throwing her under the bus was part of the plan? Part of their plan. They had a plan. And then Rye, the guy, says this: remember how reluctant and upset Lori got when Archibald was throwing Chad under the bus? Chad sure seemed not as reluctant to throw her under the bus. He seemed fine with it. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, he doesn't care. He'd sell her out in a heartbeat. I mean, but I think Lori will be fine with it because Chad's probably already told her that it's going to happen, and he's just doing it because he needs to be acquitted. One of them has to be acquitted in order to carry on their gathering.
Yeah. Thank you, Teresa, so much. We appreciate that. We will definitely be taking some downtime soon as we can. Oh, someone's suggesting that I use colloidal silver. But the question is, will I be okay after, or will I be murdered? tell me about what did you think about Lindsay Blake? How did you feel Lindsay Blake did? Because I feel like the jurors might have been really confused throughout the entire trial with all the going back and forth. And I felt what Lindsay Blake did well was sort of tie everything together and remind people of all of the evidence that they saw. How did you feel she did, though?
I thought she did great. That's what I said at the start of the show. I thought she did a remarkable job of tying everything together, and not only tying it together, but so she told a compelling story and she backed it up with evidence, and that's what juries want. I thought at the end of her closing arguments that there would be virtually no chance for Chad to get acquitted.
Okay. Greta says Pryor's theme throughout this trial was based on solid misogynistic foundation. I kind of enjoyed that it was Lindsay Blake giving that closing argument, a female attorney. Anyway, I love that. Thoughts on that, John?
Yeah, I agree. I think that was part of Chad's hostility through his nonverbals. I think that was part of it. I think he did the fact that he had to endure Lindsay Blake doing the closing arguments and doing so well with it. I think it must have irked him to no end.
Yeah. Man, he was irked. Just watching him, he was irked. Anything else you noticed? Anything else you noticed today?
I think those are the main points. I think it went well for the prosecution. I think it'll be. I'll be interested to after there is a verdict. I'll be interested to see what some of the jurors think of Pryor and, in particular, his closing arguments.
Yeah, I will be interested as well. They were very dramatic. What did you think about him repeating himself over and over again? Was that a style? He would say, "But let me think, creasing. But Chad is the victim. Chad is the victim. Chad
Target.
is the target. Chad is the target. Chad is the target." He'd say something like 4 times before he went on. I'm like, "Dude, we could have, like, done this closing argument, like, half the time." Was that just a style thing? Was it just an emphasis, a style, or was it just as annoying as I thought it was?
I think it's just repetition is part of what attorneys do. Lindsay Blake did the same thing. She kept saying in the little clip you just played, she kept saying he's dark, he knew death percentages, right? And the body had to be destroyed, right? She had talking points she kept coming back to, by the way.
Yes. Yes.
So when early on, by the way, so on the issue you just raised, Pryor wants you to know, this is a quote from Pryor. He said, so he was talking about how so much information was ignored, like texts, for example, that had contrary information than the prosecution presented. And Pryor wants to know that, quote, "What I'm doing today is a lost art." That Pryor is one of the lucky few, apparently, who can still communicate well and still, right? Did you hear that part? He can still communicate and he can still make a compelling argument to the jury. So to answer your question, I think repetition is part of driving home his message. That's why he's repeating himself so often, because clearly we know we've learned from this trial that John Pryor has figured out the lost art of true communication. It was a master class in communication from John Pryor.
Shedding and communication, or how not to shed. Or shedding's okay. Shedding, anonymous.
Shedding, it's okay if Pryor sheds, but I'll say it again. It's okay as long as he doesn't shed on me.
Right. Aren't abusers always the victims in their story? I love this question by CC.
Yes, quite frequently. I mean, it's one of the main tenets of narcissism, is just this inability to take responsibility and to play the victim role and to blame others for all your problems. Because obviously, if you're perfect and incapable of making mistakes and you have no faults, then you're gonna have to blame other people.
Jenny, we just want to thank you so much. Thank you for your generosity. Truly, thank you. John and I are going to take and get some downtime in when this is over. Thank you, everyone. There are some great questions. How about Pryor calling Zulema out for being married to a murderer, but he didn't seem to catch that, according to Chad, also being married to a murderer. So he was mocking Zulema for marrying a murderer. And then, what did you think about him just repeating? It wasn't just that he brought Heather Daybell up. He had on the screen Heather Daybell, pot stirrer. Like, that was his title for Heather Daybell. Heather Daybell, pot stirrer. I was like giggling to myself. I'm like, this is amazing. I'm like, Heather would be so proud right now. I was so proud. I was like, you just made the PowerPoint as a pot stirrer. And then that was one of his repetitive words. He kept saying, Heather Daybell, that pot stirrer. She's a pot stirrer. That pot stirrer. Just a pot stirrer. And it was like that moment was amazing. I was proud of that moment. I'm like, you tell him, John Pryor. Heather Daybell's a pot stirrer.
He undoubtedly would see you as a pot stirrer too, I presume. So
yeah, I presume my own husband probably sees me as one too.
Yeah.
But I love you.
Yeah, I would definitely be on the pot stirrer list.
Yes. Ain't nothing wrong with a good pot stirrer. So, no, but I thought that was a great moment, just to like emphasize. Yeah, that's true. Pryor skipped body shaming Tammy today. He didn't blame Tammy for not being petite enough. That's a good point.
Well, he sure shamed the heck out of Lori.
He did.
Lori, the convicted murderer, but still he wanted to make the point somehow that being married 5 times means that you're going to target people for money or whatever she was. I still don't understand why she was targeting him, but whatever it was, it had to do with the fact that she's divorced or she's been married 5 times.
Oh yeah, he body shamed himself today too. Did you notice that? And Chad laughed at it. Chad laughed.
Well, yeah, he thought that he landed one with the jury on that, by the way. The 30-inch waistline, like, I mean,
I know.
That's a really arbitrary number, by the way. Why 30-inch? Like, it seems to
Sounds
me like a 36-inch waist would be a pretty admirable goal for him.
I'm like, go for 29.
Yeah.
Did
seem a little arbitrary.
Right. I mean, so Diana's bringing up Elizabeth Taylor, but she back then, Elizabeth Taylor received the same sort of criticism, right, as shaming of her divorcee status. It's not all that glitters is gold, and not all misogynistic judgments disappear.
I definitely think he could have done a little more with the Fitbit, though. He brought it up, but it seemed to me that you and I were kind of joking about some lines we could use with the Fitbit, right? Like one of my favorites would be, I'm trying to remember what it is now. I think it was if the Fitbit steps aren't legit, then you must acquit.
If the
steps aren't legit, you must acquit. But I think he really missed the window on that one. He had all kinds of. He had the Fitbit. He could have had a Fitbit moment.
What do you think? Oh, interesting. Thank you so much, Nancy. Thank you, everyone, for your generosity during this time. Truly, thank you for your kindness. Um, Chad looked straight into the camera multiple times. Like I said, he kind of looked back at someone like, "What?" Almost daring them to keep looking. Um, what do you think's going to happen tomorrow? So let me explain what we know. So we all hung around court again for until they kicked us out when they said the jurors are going back to their hotel. They're sequestered. That's going to make things rush along, by the way, because they can't go home until they have a verdict. So that's
Yeah.
going to push them to get a guilty or a verdict, guilty or not guilty, sooner than later. They did not do it today. Again, they were tired today. The one gentleman that was very tired was probably like, "I'm not gonna burn the candle on both ends tonight. Let me go back to my hotel." Hopefully some of the moms in the jury are enjoying their night in a hotel as well. Maybe hopefully they get some good, reality television in, and relax a bit. So they're going to be coming back. We are allowed to arrive at the courthouse at 8 a.m. It depends on how I'm feeling. Um, you know, uh, if I'm even going, I just don't know. Um,
I would if you want to be there for the verdict, I'd probably be there tomorrow. I don't know how early, but I think that there's so much evidence though that I think it's quite possible that they're not going to come to an initial agreement without going through a fair amount of evidence. So I think it may take them a moment to get through some evidence, but I mean, I could be wrong about this. You've seen the jury and you've seen how they paid attention, but it seems to me like after Lindsay Blake's closing arguments, I just don't know. It was so compelling.
yeah.
I just don't see them deliberating that long.
Many people asking who was in the courtroom audience today, who was in the gallery. So Aunt Vicky was sick, unfortunately. Um, you know, I've got to check on her. Poor Aunt Vicky, Tammy's aunt. But both of Tammy's cousins, Julie Brooks, who I interviewed, as well as Patty, who testified in court, they were there in the courtroom. The Woodcocks were both there in the courtroom. Dawson, who I interviewed, Joe Murray's brother, Emma Daybell, Murray's brother-in-law, Dawson Murray, was in the courtroom. He noticed when Chad was mouthing something. Um, who else was there? And then multiple law enforcement were in the courtroom. Many of those that testified, including FBI, were in the courtroom. In fact, most of the room in the center of the courtroom was taken up with law enforcement officials. And and then victims advocates were there. Trying to think who else, but those are who I can think of off the top of my head that were there today. Chad's kids, of course, were not there. I do know that I believe that Matt and Heather Daybell will be coming for the verdict. That's what I've heard.
I would expect it by the end of the week, but it may take them a day. There's so much evidence. It may take them a day to kind of work through some of it again, just to be sure.
Yeah. If I was sequestered, I might be like, I need like 3 more days in my hotel room, 3 more nights away. That's what there was a mother that was in jury selection at the beginning of the case. There was a mother, and John Pryor kept saying, "You have so many kids and we're in a daycare. We can't sequester you." She's like, "No, really, you can't. I'm good. No, it would be a treat. Like, please." And John Pryor kept saying, "Oh man, we could just never do that to you." She's like, "Why not?" It was the funniest thing. Like John Pryor just kept trying. She's like, "I'm pretty sure I'd enjoy being sequestered."
Yeah.
She wasn't picked in the end, but she made it very clear that being a mother to about 8 kids and running a daycare, there'd be no problem in her mind being sequestered.
Yeah. She's like, please sequester me.
Please, could someone sequester me already?
Yeah, exactly.
Anything else before we go?
I think I'm sure I probably overlooked a few things, but I barely had time to go through my notes. So I think those are the main points. But it's been a long journey, and here we are at the end. So this is, in some ways, you and I have kind of come full circle. So
It's
we
true.
started with this 4 years ago, and we're seeing it through to the end.
You're right.
So
You're right. You're right. Except that I might get sick tonight, and not be, no,
you're gonna miss the verdict.
no. I will find a way. I will find a way. Thank you, John, for being here. I know you've had a long night, and you're also parenting and holding down the fort. Thank you to those who gave us a date night. Definitely be taking that soon after we're both better.
Yeah,
So
thank you.
yeah. So this stream will go to our verdict live stream. The verdict live stream, of course, we don't know when the verdict's going to come down. So you'll see that it's scheduled for Friday night. Guys, it could happen at any time. So hit subscribe and hit notifications so that you do not miss the verdict coming down, or any of my lives that I do, especially with tomorrow, because we don't know when the verdict will come down. I might jump in and out of court to maybe do some lives outside. I don't know. So hit subscribe, and also just thank you. We have grown so much during this trial. Thank you for your support. I also put, if you guys want to hear the closing arguments, I put them on our podcast today, both of them. So prosecution and defense, you can go to our podcast, Spotify, Apple, or anywhere you listen to podcasts, and listen to those closing arguments for the prosecution or the defense. And thank you to those that joined Dr. John in his book club today. He usually does a couple of hours, and I made him get off after an hour to do this, because holy cow. But I think everyone was happy. So thank you to our book club members who are here and sacrificed a little bit of time with Dr. John so we could jump on here and talk closing arguments, because it is a really, really big deal. And remember, this is important too, guys, with this jury. This jury chooses whether or not he gets the death penalty or something else. This jury plays a part in sentencing. That is different than last year. So there's a lot.
That's a good point.
more.
That's a good point, by the way. It may take them longer because of that. Now that I
Okay.
think about it, because this is a death penalty case, I think they might spend a little more time evaluating the evidence more closely. So yeah, I think, yeah, it's conceivable they may not come back until early next week.
Okay.
I think the
No.
evidence is overpowering, but now that you mention it, the death penalty part of this could change the equation a little bit.
But they don't have to come back. They first have to come back with a verdict. Then they
Right.
do the sentencing. So
Right. I know they're separate, but I'm just saying the fact that they know that the death penalty is underlying this case.
right.
So I think the comeback guilty, they know what that means, even though they're not going to decide on that right away. I think it may potentially create a situation where they want to evaluate the evidence a little more carefully.
Okay. The people want to know what you're drinking tonight. Someone just asked.
What I'm drinking? Just unsweetened iced tea.
There you go. There you go. So answering questions. Thanks, everyone. Have a great night, and I will hopefully see you tomorrow. John will also be watching, and we will be having a live verdict. So again, hit subscribe, hit notification, and thank you to our Patreon members who support us on Patreon with a monthly membership. It means so much to us and keeps us going, and we'll be having a live over there soon. Not tonight, but soon, after verdict. So, all right, you guys, we'll see you later. Have a good night.
All right. Good night.